But before I go through the process of procurement for innovation, I just want to remind you of the usual process that we find we have for traditional procurement. So most of us would be familiar with the traditional procurement process, which looks just like this, where we may or may not engage with the market through perhaps an expression of interest. Usually we don't in the public sector. We will just jump straight to tender process. We will run the tender, we'll get submissions, we'll review those submissions and evaluate, we'll award the contract, then we'll manage the contract and the suppliers, and a product or service will be delivered or built. However, in procurement for innovation, the process becomes a lot longer. And so what we find is that first of all, this looks quite scary to a lot of people who are used to doing things very rapidly. But one of the things you need to know about procurement for innovation is that it indeed takes longer. And the reason why is because we slow things down and give ourselves time in that first stage there of identifying the need. The first step is about identifying the need. We slow things down and really spend time on what is our unmet need. Is there a solution for it already on the market? If there is, that's just a straightforward procurement process. If there isn't, that's a potential procurement for innovation project. We look at things like the business case and how we might articulate our outcomes and needs in a specification document. And indeed, we do draft a specification in the identification of need stage, and we develop all of that into a set of expression of interest documents. The big chunk of time, often, by the way, that identifying the need phase we've found takes up to a year to deliver. Market engagement can take you up to 3 years to deliver. That's the second phase. And 3 years sounds like a really long time, but when you're looking to bring innovation to the market, innovation takes time. And so the market engagement phase is this really important part of the process, which is about taking your unmet need out to the market through a specification that you've issued through an expression of interest process, and asking the market whether you're asking for too much, or perhaps you're not asking for enough, which has been the case for us on both cases when we've run our procurement for innovation out to our procurement for innovations out to the market. We've found that in one case we weren't asking for enough; the market was able to do even more than what we're asking for. And in another instance, we found that the market gave us feedback that said, actually, you're asking for too much. We're not quite ready for that level of innovation, but here's what we can do. And so we adapted our specification to be able to allow for that when it came time for tender for that particular project. But the market engagement phase will include that advertising your expression of interest. You might run some supplier forums so that the market is really clear about what it is that you want to achieve. You'll likely shortlist your expressions of interest. We initiated a commercialisation panel too, so that once we'd received expressions of interest and we had evaluated those, we had a group of subject matter experts that we could run those innovations past, just to get an idea, a feel for whether the innovations would likely be able to come to fruition in the time that we had before we went for procurement. We ran a supplier survey too in our market engagement. That enabled us to understand from the market what kind of support did they need in order to be able to provide us with the innovations that we were looking for. And luckily for us, we were able to indeed provide that business support through our economic development unit, which is where I sit, which is arm's reach enough from the procurement end of the exercise to enable that kind of level of business support and market engagement to occur, because there's not that direct link with the procurement end, which in the instance of the bridges occurred through our engineering team. So market engagement is very much worth spending the time on. It's where you get the really useful feedback from the market about what's possible and what's not. Procurement process pretty much follows the same process as traditional procurement, where we will refine the tender based on the feedback we've got from the market. We'll issue it, we'll award the contract. And of course, at the final stage of procurement for innovation, which is the same as any stage of a procurement exercise, it's the contract and supplier management phase, where the product or service is delivered or built. We manage the contract and suppliers. And importantly, from our perspective, from a procurement for innovation perspective, we always review and share and apply the lessons to the next procurement. So examples before I finish up, examples from elsewhere. Before I finish up, I wanted to give you a couple of these, and then I'll just illustrate how we applied the method to our age-defying bridges project. There are plenty of examples from where this method has been used elsewhere overseas. We are certainly not the first to use it in the world, but we were the first to use it in Australia, which is we're very proud of and has been a really terrific experience. But the case studies for each of these procurement for innovation exercises feature in our e-learning modules. And you can see there's a whole host of different procurements where procurement for innovation has been applied that have been able to achieve innovations for the public sector buyers who have used the methodology elsewhere. Examples of how the City of Greater Geelong have used it. So we have used it, the first time we used it was back in 2017, gosh, which seems like such a long time ago, where we went out to market with an unmet need, which we described as a zero maintenance recreational bridge with a 100+ year design life. And the reason why we were asking for a zero maintenance recreational bridge, with such a long design life, was because we were spending quite a lot of our ratepayers' money. We had an ongoing budget item of $500,000, which was purely intended for the repair and maintenance of bridges in our recreational spaces. And we needed to stop spending that much money. And so we decided to go out to market and see if we could indeed secure a zero maintenance recreational bridge from the market. Subsequent to that, we also went out to market more recently for the design and supply of road infrastructure products that apply the principles of circular economy. And what we looked for there were road infrastructure products that were curbs and gutters, pavements and road surfaces using recycled materials from our curbside collection bins, the yellow bins. So our Bridges project and indeed the Circular Economy Road Infrastructure project have become really useful ways for us to identify how we can use suppliers on the market to help us achieve innovations that are important to our community, and how we can achieve innovations that are also important for us to be able to solve problems that we have, particularly problems that relate to others in the public sector. I'll finish up just by quickly running through, because I'm a little bit over time on you, but I'll just finish up by running through the procurement for innovation e-learning modules. The modules, there are 5 of them. They begin with module 1, which is describing the principles, which are all of those things about how do you relate procurement for innovation to the way that you do things currently, and how do you get buy-in for it, essentially, because one of the biggest hurdles we all have is how do we create the time to be able to do this on top of our day jobs. So the e-learning modules start with the principles of procurement for innovation, and then they move on to the process that you follow to identify an unmet need. And then module 3 is about how you run that market engagement process, which I've literally just skimmed over for now, but module 3 is the really detailed module, which gives you much more insight into how you run the market engagement phase. Module 4 is about assisting with that procurement for innovation procurement process, which is pretty much the same as standard procurement, but that's where we also help with things like how might you weight the criteria that you develop for a procurement for innovation project, because it can be a little bit tricky to get your head around how you might do that if you're used to just using the same criteria and weighting them the same way, contract after contract. And then, of course, module 5 is about how you best do contract and supplier management. One of the questions I get asked often is, who is the procurement for innovation training for? And we say essentially it's for anyone who wishes to engage in the procurement for innovation methodology. The e-learning is written in a way that it can be viewed by leaders in your organisation that you're trying to get permission to establish at least the time allowance to be able to look into this, right through to budget holders, procurement practitioners, specifiers of product, and indeed suppliers can even get a lot out of the training too. So the modules are intended to be are intended to be very action learning oriented. So you'll find there's case studies in there. There are videos and voiceovers from folks in the City of Greater Geelong who have used the methodology. There are heaps of templates in a resources tab that enable you to be able to pick up things that we at the city have used and adapt them for your own purposes so that you don't have to, reinvent wheels essentially. So look, I'll finish up now so that we've got time for questions. I hope you've got a bit out of this in terms of the City of Greater Geelong's experience of running a procurement for innovation process, and are clear about how you can use it as a methodology to link it to your strategic intentions as an organisation. And for us, those strategic intentions are written in all sorts of policies and strategies, and we honed it down to a few of them that we wanted to focus our attention on, most notably our UNESCO City of Design designation, our Clever Creative Future Vision, and things like our waste and resource recovery strategy and climate change adaptation plans. Because procurement for innovation is about bringing innovations to market that, as I mentioned, are strategic, are impactful, and indeed are replicable. I've explained to you what the 4 stages of procurement for innovation are, and that really important bit, which is about market engagement. And I have to say, just to finish off, one of the challenges we had in our team when we were working on our first procurement for innovation with the Age Defying Bridges project was switching off our propensity to jump to solutions, rather than taking it to the market and asking the experts who deliver that stuff, those kinds of solutions on a regular basis. So I guess if there's one takeaway I'd suggest to you if you're thinking about using this methodology is it's okay to take your time, because there are certain things that we are just geared to do, which is jump to solutions often in our workplaces. And procurement for innovation challenges you not to do that, because it's very much about helping you to build output specifications so that you can encourage innovation from the market. And if you're too prescriptive because you've jumped to solutions and exactly how things are going to happen, then you miss some real innovation opportunities. The last thing to say too is that the Bridges project has been phenomenal for us as an organisation, and the suppliers who are involved in that. It's been award-winning, which has been amazing both locally and nationally, and indeed internationally. So we've shared our e-learning across the UNESCO City of Design network globally, and indeed across councils in Australia and in New Zealand. So if there are folks listening today and watching, then we're more than happy to share the e-learning modules. It's one of those resources that was generated using public money, so we'd be absolutely chuffed to bits to be able to share it with folks if they feel they'd get some use from it. So thanks so much for your time. I hope we've got enough time just about for some questions. Thanks, Mayuri, and thanks everyone for having me.